There is a powder that costs $5 and kills pest insects without chemicals, without the possibility of resistance, and without any danger to humans or animals, not slows their reproduction, not repels them temporarily, kills them, at the mechanical level, within hours. One line of powder around the perimeter of your home and ants, cockroaches, fleas, and bedbugs do not cross it. No smell, no toxic fumes, no risk to the children or dogs sleeping on the floor. $5 worth of powder poured from a bag through a kitchen strainer. Egyptian agricultural engineers used it to protect grain reserves 3,000 years ago. Roman armies lined the granaries of their frontier fortresses from Britain to Mesopotamia with it. American researchers integrated it into military food storage protocols during the Second World War. Every civilization that stored food over long periods arrived at the same conclusion independently. That is not folklore. That is convergent physics discovered by observation over 3 millennia on 4 continents, and it costs $5. Then someone in a corporate boardroom did the math. The global pesticide market generates over $70 billion a year. Household consumer insecticides account for more than $8 billion in the United States alone. A non-patentable powder that any homeowner can pour from a $5 bag is not a product opportunity. It is a threat to neutralize. They did not stop recommending it because it failed. They stopped because it worked too well. A substance that cannot be patented, cannot generate a recurring cartridge revenue model, and cannot be sold as a proprietary system, cannot be allowed to compete openly with a $70 billion industry built entirely on your dependence. This is the story of diatomaceous earth, the pest killer that empires trusted and the pesticide industry buried. Welcome to Forbidden Camping. If these stories matter to you, the subscribe button and the bell are the best way to make sure this knowledge survives. Here we open the vaults the industry locked shut. Take yourself back 30 million years. In shallow freshwater lakes spread across every continent, microscopic organisms called diatoms build crystalline silica exoskeletons. Each diatom is smaller than a human hair, but its shell is made of the same material as glass. When these organisms die, their shells sink to the lake floor and accumulate in sediment layers over millions of years. What we call diatomaceous earth today is a sedimentary rock formed from those fossilized shells. It exists in natural deposits on every inhabited continent on the planet. Storage engineers in ancient Egypt made a discovery through direct observation. Grain kept in certain pits dug into specific soils resisted insect infestation far better than grain stored elsewhere. Those soils contained natural pockets of fossil diatoms. The grain reserves of the Old Kingdom, the reserves that kept millions of people alive through the flooding cycles of the Nile, were built on geological formations naturally rich in fossil silica. In China, medical texts from the Han period, written around 200 BC, describe the application of light white earth to cultivated plants to protect crops from sucking insects. Herbalists along the Silk Road used the same powder in the provision bags of caravans to prevent insect infestation during 6-week crossings through the Gobi Desert. Indigenous peoples of the Great Plains integrated diatomaceous earth into their corn and bean storage pits before European contact. No communication between continents, the same discovery, the same result, the same substance. Every civilization that stored food over long periods arrived at the same conclusion independently. That is not intuition. That is physics, that repeated observation confirmed over 3,000 years. Here is why it works, and this is where it gets truly uncomfortable for the pesticide industry. Chemical insecticides, the sprays, the bombs, the granule products you buy at the hardware store, work by poisoning the insect's nervous system. The problem with neurological poisoning is evolutionary. Insect populations adapt to chemical toxins within a few generations. That is why pesticide manufacturers reformulate their products every 5 to 10 years. Each reformulation is a new patent. Each new patent is a new revenue cycle. Diatomaceous earth does not work through chemistry, it works through physics. Fossilized diatom shells are sharp at the microscopic level, not sharp like a knife. Sharp like broken glass at the scale of a human hair. When an insect crawls through a deposit of diatomaceous earth, the microscopic silica edges lacerate the waxy layer covering its exoskeleton. That waxy layer is the waterproof barrier that prevents the insect from dehydrating. Once that barrier is destroyed, the insect loses its cellular moisture within hours and dies of dehydration. No insect can develop resistance to physical dehydration. It is not a toxin to neutralize. It is not a neurological pathway to root around. It is fundamental physics. If an insect has an exoskeleton and crawls through silica edges, it loses moisture and it dies. There is no possible evolutionary adaptation to physics. The pesticide industry depends on you never understanding this distinction. Because an insecticide that works through irreversible physics never needs reformulation. It does not generate a resistance cycle. It does not force the customer to buy a new version every 5 years because the cockroaches in his building have developed tolerance to the previous compound. Before I go further, everything I have revealed barely scratches the surface of what has been hidden from you. I spent months gathering the survival techniques, the DIY methods, and the suppressed knowledge that industries have buried for decades. All of it is inside the complete forbidden camping vault. The tannic acid that stops rust permanently for $3. The earth battery that generates free electricity from 2 metals and wet soil, the trom wall that slashes your heating bill by 70% with black paint and glass, the linseed oil formula that restores weathered wood for $2, the acrylic resin that rebuilds your car's oxidized paint for $3, the activated charcoal that replaces your water filter cartridges for $4, and now the complete diatomaceous earth guide with exact dosages, application zones, and storage methods. 10 survival guides in one vault, 0 filler, every page built for immediate action. The link is in the description right now. But stay here, because the military proof behind this powder is about to make the pesticide industry very uncomfortable. In 1942, the United States Army had a critical problem. The food storage warehouses across the Pacific Theater, the ration reserves that fed hundreds of thousands of soldiers from Guadalcanal to Papua New Guinea, were being overrun by insects in conditions of tropical heat and humidity that available chemical insecticides could not durably control. Insects were developing partial tolerance to available formulations within weeks inside certain warehouses. The United States Agricultural Research Service conducted emergency testing on grain protection methods for military warehouses between 1942 and 1944. Their results were archived in the collections of the United States Department of Agriculture, where they remain accessible today. Diatomaceous earth applied directly into grain stores at a rate of a few grams per kilogram provided sustained protection against every insect species tested with 0 degradation and effectiveness over the duration of the tests. No resistance observed, no toxicity to soldiers handling or consuming treated grain, no renewal cost. The same warehouses protected in 1942 remained protected in 1944 without a single reapplication. The United States Environmental Protection Agency has registered diatomaceous earth as a permitted insecticide since 1960. It appears on the approved product list for use in certified organic production under National Organic Program standards. The European Union classifies it as a basic substance of no concern under Pesticide Regulation 1107/2009. This is not fringe science. These are government regulators validating 6 decades of documented effectiveness. After 1945, the chemical industry had a problem on its hands. Companies like Bayer, BASF, and Syngenta had spent billions building synthetic insecticide manufacturing infrastructure during the war years. They had built distribution networks, sales teams, and marketing departments around products that cost 10 to 50 times more than crushed sedimentary rock. A powder that any homeowner can buy in a $5 bag and pour around their house was not a product opportunity. It was an existential threat to their entire business model. The global pesticide market generates $70 billion a year. The household consumer insecticide segment accounts for more than $8 billion in the United States alone. The homeowner who buys a $12 insecticide bomb comes back the following month because the cockroaches have developed partial tolerance to the previous formulation. They come back because the ants found another untreated path. They come back because the product degrades under light and humidity and loses its effectiveness within weeks under real-world conditions. Think about that principle for a long moment. The entire business model of the household insecticide industry rests on a cycle of partial and temporary effectiveness. A product that works completely and permanently is a product that generates no recurring revenue. Customer dependence is the renewable resource the industry is harvesting, not the insect problem. Diatomaceous earth cannot be patented because it is a naturally occurring substance. You cannot build a franchise empire around a powder that geological formations in 40 countries produce for free. You cannot create a subscription model around a single application whose effectiveness does not degrade. You cannot justify $12 for an insecticide bomb when the permanent solution costs $5 and requires only one application. So the industry did what industries always do when a cheap solution threatens expensive recurring revenue. They made it invisible. Not banned, not discredited, simply absent from every product recommendation, every pest control guide, every hardware store shelf placed at eye level. And then they repackaged it. Pull up the ingredient list on any premium organic garden pest control product at any garden center. You will find diatomaceous earth listed as the active ingredient in formulations sold for $15 to $40 per bottle. They take $5 worth of crushed sedimentary rock, put it in a spray bottle with a premium logo and an organic certification badge, and sell it back to you at 8 times the price of the raw bag. The chemistry inside that bottle is identical to what Egyptian agricultural engineers poured into grain pits 3,000 years ago. The only difference is the label and the markup. If you have made it this far, you already know more about pest control than 99% of homeowners who called an exterminator this month. Subscribe and share this with someone who is paying $150 per quarter for a pest control service solving a problem a $5 bag handles permanently. Everything the industry buried is inside the complete forbidden camping vault. The link is in the description. Stay with me because what comes next is the part they really do not want you to hear. Here is exactly what to do, and it is almost insultingly simple. Go to any health food store, agricultural supplier, or online bulk retailer and purchase food-grade diatomaceous earth. That detail is critical. There are two grades, food grade and pool filter grade. Pool filter grade has been heat treated and converted into cristobalite silica, a form of silica that is dangerous to inhale. Purchase exclusively food grade, which is composed of amorphous silica and is harmless to humans and animals. A 500-gram bag of food-grade diatomaceous earth costs between $5 and $8 and will treat an entire 2,500 square foot home with material left over for your garden and your camping gear. For indoor protection against ants, cockroaches, and fleas, apply a thin line along baseboards, around pipes that penetrate walls, under kitchen appliances, and in the corners of cabinets. You do not need a thick layer. A thin layer is more effective than a thick one because insects must physically walk through the particles for the mechanics to work. A pile of powder they can walk around is useless. For bed bugs, apply around each bed leg, under the bed frame, and along the perimeter of the bedroom. Bed bugs do not fly. They walk. Every walking path becomes a trap. For fleas, apply lightly across carpets, rugs, and pet sleeping areas. Let it sit for 48 to 72 hours, then vacuum. Vacuuming removes the carcasses and saturated particles while leaving enough residue in the fibers for continued protection. For camping gear storage, tool storage, and emergency supply areas, lay a line of powder around the perimeter of every storage surface. One application lasts until the powder is physically disturbed or wetted. In dry, covered conditions, a single application can last months without renewal. A market gardener in rural Montana began documenting diatomaceous earth applications on an 80-square-foot greenhouse in 2020 after developing pyrethroid resistance in his aphid population. 3 growing seasons later, his greenhouse has recorded 0 significant infestations. His annual cost, one $6 bag renewed once per year after the spring deep clean. His previous cost with synthetic insecticides, roughly $180 per growing season. He spent $6. The exterminator he used to call charged $85 per visit. I need to be honest with you about the limitations, because this powder is not magic, and there are real constraints you need to understand. Diatomaceous earth loses all effectiveness when wet. Damp silica no longer has the sharp edges that lacerate exoskeletons. For outdoor applications exposed to rain, you need to reapply after every significant rainfall event. Indoors and in sheltered areas, one application can last indefinitely. It is not selective between species. It will kill beneficial insects just as effectively as pests if they cross treated areas. Do not apply in pollinator foraging zones or around flowering plants during bloom. And one safety warning that most DIY channels completely ignore: while food-grade amorphous silica is considered harmless, avoid inhaling the dust during application. Wear a basic dust mask when applying in enclosed spaces. The risk is not chemical, it is mechanical. Fine dust of any kind is irritating to lungs at high exposure. A 0.50 dust mask solves that problem entirely. Within those limits, this substance is the most versatile, lowest cost, and historically validated insecticide in human history. Every civilization that moved food over long distances arrived at the same conclusion. The agricultural engineers of the Egyptian Old Kingdom building the pharaoh's granaries, the quartermasters of Roman legions supplying fortresses from Britain to Syria, the Silk Road caravan masters keeping 6-week provisions intact through the Gobi Desert, American soldiers in Pacific Theater warehouses in 1943, and your great-grandparents who poured white powder into flour boxes and bean sacks in farmhouse cellars before every winter because their parents had taught them and their parents before them. Then one generation stopped passing it down because a television commercial told them there was a better way. There was not a better way, there was just a more expensive way. $70 billion in annual pesticide revenue depends on you never learning the name of this sedimentary rock. $8 billion a year in household insecticides depends on you believing that cockroaches, ants, and fleas require proprietary chemical treatments that must be reformulated every 5 years because insects develop resistance. Resistance that is physically impossible against fundamental mechanics. This knowledge did not disappear. It was priced out of your awareness, buried under marketing budgets, and hidden behind proprietary trade names. Physics does not care about brand strategy. A silica edge does not expire. Diatoms have never charged a licensing fee. If this vault changed how you look at the insecticide can under your sink, the exterminator invoice in your mailbox, or the insects getting into your camping gear and food supplies, subscribe and share this now. Every single share puts a crack in the wall they spent decades building around knowledge that was never theirs to lock away. Every subscription keeps this channel digging deeper into the vaults they thought were sealed forever. The next vault opens soon, and what is inside is the one thing every camper throws away after a campfire that could purify any contaminated water source in the field.